Hey, good people. Welcome to the Evolving Education Project podcast, hosted by me, Dr. Tiffany M. Niachai, and friends, where we center the educational joys, passions, interests, and inquiries of people of color. This episode is the book interview, part 2 of our Culturally and Historically Responsive Literacy Now, the Brilliance and Joy of Students of Color series. To start from the beginning of the series, go to episode 14 and listen all the way through. We don't want you to miss any part of this powerful series. Today, we will be interviewing our inspiration for the series, Dr. Gholdy Muhammad, Professor of Literacy, Language, and Culture at the University of Illinois at Chicago. She has previously served as a classroom teacher, literacy specialist, school district administrator, curriculum director, and school board president. She studies Black historical excellence in education for the purpose of reframing curriculum and instruction today. Her culturally and historically responsive education model has been adopted across thousands of U.S. schools and districts across Canada. In 2022, 2023, and 2024, she was named among the top 1% of EduScholar public influencers due to her impact on policy and practice. In her best-selling book, Cultivating Genius, an equity model for culturally and historically responsive literacy, Dr. Muhammad historically reminds us that literacy in Black literary societies was not only tied to skills, but also to identity, current events, joy, and love. Additionally, and I quote, literacy was always connected to social justice and change for the rights of humanity. Building from this historical grounding and previous scholarship on cultural theories, anti-deficit language and practices, culturally relevant and responsive education, Dr. Muhammad presents a framework for culturally and historically responsive literacy, pointing out the importance of, quote, frameworks that have been written by people of color and designed for children of color. Her 5-layered equity framework for reimagining teaching and learning standards includes student development in identity, skills, intellect, criticality, and joy. Within the culturally and historically responsive literacy model, identity goals offer students opportunities to learn more about themselves while acquiring the literacy and content area skills they need. But the model doesn't stop there. It is also important for students to become more knowledgeable about something through intellectual goals. And this something should be ideas, concepts, information that they want to learn more about. Furthermore, criticality, quote, helps students to name, understand, question, and disrupt oppression in the world and within the self, and to work to make the world a better place. Isn't that just beautiful? I just love her. Okay. The development of joy within the model is, quote, the ultimate goal of teaching and learning so that educators are taking care to, quote, uplift beauty, aesthetics, truth, ease, wonder, wellness, and personal fulfillment. Her second book, Unearthing Joy, a guide to culturally and historically responsive teaching and learning, is the sequel to Cultivating Genius and provides a practical guide for putting culturally and historically responsive education into curricular practice. Although we have never aired this interview, it was originally recorded in the fall of 2021 prior to the publication of Unearthing Joy, so our questions mostly focus on Cultivating Genius. However, at the time of the interview, Dr. Muhammad was so excited about her new book that she shared some of her rationale for adding joy to her original model, which is discussed in her second book. Therefore, this interview is a bit of a behind the scenes look. So I'm excited about that. I'm also excited to have Dr. Shamari Reid join me as co-host for this episode. Shamari is assistant professor of teaching and learning at New York University Steinhardt. His specific research interests include Black youth agency, Black LGBTQ plus world making, the role of critical love in education, and transformative teacher education. In addition to working with Black LGBTQ plus communities to reimagine schools, Dr. Reid's work examines radical love as a moral imperative in social justice education and as a path toward culturally sustaining school communities, which he explores in his recent book, Humans Who Teach, a guide to centering love, justice, and liberation in schools. You know, we'll have him back for that to interview him about that book. You know. Additionally, he's the creator and host of the podcast Water for Teachers. Be sure to check it out as well as his website, shamarireid.com. Now, let's listen in on our interview with Dr. Gholdy Muhammad so that we can learn more about her important books. We finally got you, Gholdy. I'm so excited to see you. And Shamari was like, yes, just said yes with no hesitation. Yes.
You said Goldie, I said yes. I mean, I don't care what it is.
I feel the same way.
Yeah. So now we're here.
So we're going to get into these good questions. We just going to flow and have a conversation.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
And listen, I was like, okay. Okay. So we're gonna so so you already know how much we love your book. And I'm just jealous of all these teachers that got this book now because this book was not out when I was in the classroom. And I'm just jealous because they got this good resource and y'all better use it too. And you better be making sure you got them 4 areas in your lesson plans because we ain't have this. Okay. We had to figure out what culturally relevant or whatever. We had to figure out how to make it into curriculum, and they have a tool that they can use. So thinking about historically responsive literacy, I really appreciate the audacity and resolve of a framework for literacy that is situated in the legacy of 19th century Black literary societies, especially when we consider how literacy is often positioned as a sole possession of the dominant culture.
Mm-hmm.
And you even claim that, and I'm gonna quote you here, in contrast to what is currently found in many schools and classrooms, the historical roots in literacy learning in Black communities were much more expansive and advanced and included identity, meaning making, and criticality. Oftentimes, we do not see the cultural and community practices of people of color as sites of learning for teachers. So, can you tell us more about your audacity and resolve to build from the legacy of Black literary societies and how these societies offered more expansive and advanced literacy?
Yeah. So where does our audacity come from? I don't know. Is it natural? Is it organic? Were we born with it? Are we tired? Are we exhausted from whiteness and from, these other practices that have not served us well? I don't know. Maybe all of the above. Maybe it's building confidence over time. Maybe it's our faith and all these things. I think it's a little bit of everything for me. I was really intentional about writing to us in the book and have other people learn from us, our language, our talk, our history, instead of writing directly to the people who make up the largest of our teaching population, white teachers. I did not want to do that directly. I think there's a lot that, everybody can learn from in the book. But, I felt like conscious teachers, Black teachers, brown teachers don't get enough of just direct, like what you're doing is right and righteous. And they don't get enough affirmation to what they have been doing. They get a lot of pushback in institutions, in schools and things. So, I really wanted to write to excavate this history for some and to unearth it and bring it out. Because for me, I would read about this history and it was teaching me how to be a better teacher. it was teaching me how to be a better thinker, a writer, a doer. And I just thought, if it could help me, it could help other people. And I started about 12 years ago testing the model out by writing lessons and engaging with teachers in Florida, New York, and everywhere. And teachers were starting to say, "Yeah, this is beautiful and great and purposeful, and this is what, is helping restore my energy." And so my whole work is really like, how can Black history, Black thought, Black liberation, Black excellence, Black lives be the mechanism, the model, the medium to help everyone, to help us all think, do, teach better. And so that was really kind of like my thinking around it. And when I saw teachers' response to it across backgrounds, across spaces, it only really like it put some more fuel for me to keep going. So
No, that's so beautiful. And I love, that you mentioned you wanted to sort of write this book for us and speak to us. It sort of reminded me, of course, of Toni Morrison, right? And how she so famously said once, I didn't want to write about Black people. I wanted to write to Black people. I wanted to do. And so when thinking about us and you writing this book for us, what did you want to sort of say with this book to Black children? What did you want to say to young Black people?
I wanted to say that we are genius. We are enough. It's time for schools to recognize and validate our genius. And if they don't, we will keep recognizing it and validating it for ourselves. And we will keep working to make sure our schools do that or take our children out of schools. I wanted them to know that the ways that they are beautiful and brilliant and smart and that they have great potential, all these things that we have told them over time. And I wanted them to know that they deserve more than just decontextualized skill instruction. They deserve more than worksheets, than using textbooks. They deserve more than curriculum that wasn't written by Black and brown people for Black and brown people. They deserve more and better history and historical instruction that starts with where our history begins, which is not slavery or enslavement, right? So I wanted to tell young children, and they deserve joy, the fifth pursuit added, that they deserve to have education be a full and rich and joyful experience, not just something that you have to check off and finish and graduate. I wanted to tell them that the goal and what you deserve is self-determination, self-empowerment, self-reliance, self-liberation. The goal is not just to pass a test. And so, if I can help teachers create those kinds of spaces for our children, including our Black children, I think we're already doing better than where we were before.
I would love to hear your question, Shamari, about the North Stars right now. I just think it's
Right, and so Bettina Love, in her wonderful book, We Want to Do More Than Survive, Abolitionist Teaching and the Pursuit of Educational Freedom, talks about North Stars, right? Talks about North Stars as theories and theorists that guide us. As you were writing Cultivating Genius, who or what were your North Stars?
Wow, that's a beautiful question. Wow. I mean, so, my first ultimate North Star was the creator. I draw so much of this work comes easy to me because Islam is grounded in much of the same teachings of liberation and self and literacy and things like that. So, that becomes my guide for much of the work that I do. Mothers have been my North Star, people who have mothered me and been in my life. Even those mothers who I haven't met, like Toni Morrison and, Bell Hooks, Maya Angelou, Harriet Tubman, Maria Stewart, folks like that. Um, you know, there have been so many scholars who have written about the history and the genius of Blackness, like Joyce King, Cynthia Diller, Gloria Lassing Billings, and so many others, like the scholars, Dr. E. I remember reading Dr. Elaine Richardson in, well, I was at UIC as a student, and I remember like, wow, she just goes for it. She just says it. We've been reading all these kind of like so-called academic jargon, and like here she was. I felt like I can hear her, like she's
Yep.
sitting next to me, like she's my auntie at the kitchen table. And so, I just remember like loving her and learning from her along with so many others. And you all there's like folks who are have been doing this work alongside of me, like you two, and Bettina and Yolanda, where I feel like I have a strong village where a lot of those women may have felt in isolation doing this work. Not all the time, but not as much as we have each other now. So, yeah, I mean, it's countless. Those are a few, but it's certainly countless North Stars. And I love how she makes that connection of who is my North Star. That's a beautiful question.
So we got a constellation, a beautiful constellation.
Yes, which goes into outer space, Afrofuturism. I mean, now you're getting into a bunch of things, and I love this metaphor of space and North Star. And I've had like the honor and privilege, recently of working with Pharrell Williams, and he loves outer space. And so I said, "Oh, that's so cool." And I've been thinking a lot about this theme of outer space and Afrofuturism. It's like a space where it's like there's no whiteness, there's no we can just be ourselves and show up as ourselves. The possibilities are limitless in outer space. There are directions. Each star is different but unique, but collectively they form these beautiful images. I'm just like, yes, yes to North Star, yes to outer space, yes to Afrofuturism and all these things.
One thing I love about you, Gholdy, that from the very first time that I met you, I'm not even surprised that you answered that question in a way that is so steeped in collectivity, that's so honoring of other Black women, honoring of your ancestors, respecting the legacy that you're extending and pushing forward. Um, and I just always love that about you. And you're just a model for us about how to move out here in ways like you are the embodiment of lift as we climb. Like I just feel like you are that and you remember that. And so thinking so we asked you about your North Stars, which is very important. And what I want to ask you about is your experiences throughout your life as a child, as a teacher, that led you to that brought you to this conceptualization of historically responsive literacy, and not just we could think about it in schools, but like you already talked about your faith and how that inspired you, but maybe even out of school spaces or family or even even I know that you educate outside of schools as well. And so I've always been dealing with this tension of being more liberated in out of school spaces to teach in particular ways than like you talked about us being. I remember being penalized for doing critical approaches to teaching, and I didn't know have the name for what all the time necessarily what I was doing when I was in the classroom, but really finding refuge in these out of school spaces where I could be. So wherever, as a child, as a classroom teacher, and as a literacy scholar, what led you? How did those experiences lead you to these conceptualizations that went beyond skills, because this stuff is so whack. The regular literacy is so whack, but yours is better. So how?
How did it lead me to anti-whack literacy?
Yes.
New book
That's an
alert.
article. That's
New
an
book
article.
alert. Anti-whack literacy. Please, can you write that?
Yes.
Conceptualizing anti-whack literacy. Yes, that's your piece, Tiffany. We're all gonna, be like 50
Write it
co-authors.
together.
That's what we need, 50 co-authors to show the
Listen.
world, the academic world, something different. I don't know. It's funny, like just talking about like how we got here, how I got here. You ever had the feeling where you don't know how you got through and all of a sudden you're here and you survived and somehow you thrived and you're shining? I mean, I have been through so many moments of my life where I'm like, I'm just not going to make it. I'm not going to make it through. And, you know, I just felt that. I would tell myself that. My circumstances sort of like contributed to that statement. And then when I look back now, I'm just like, wow, it almost feels like a blur. Like, I don't know. And so it has to be something bigger working for me because I don't understand like how I made it to even the point of cultivating genius. I mean, I know, but I don't know, right? I know that I always loved as a child to be a teacher. I was playing teacher everywhere. Anybody, I would study something just to teach it. I didn't know what. I would just study something just so I could teach it to somebody else and make my big brother like be my student because my sister, my older sister, she had, real business but him, I could talk him into being my student and he was always my student with my chalkboard. And I love teaching. I love the empowerment I gave to myself when I taught someone else, when I taught myself. It just made me feel good. And, when I was a classroom teacher, we didn't, like you said, Tiffany, like we didn't know how to do. I mean, I read like Dr. Gloria Lassing Billings at that point, and it sung to my soul. And I read, but we didn't really learn how to teach in this way, for real, for real. And it has to be something spiritual from our ancestors. It has to be something organic. It has to be something bigger than ourselves to know what to do for us and how to do it. And I think it was always inside of me to bring more history, to bring more experiences, to bring more literacy. Experiences in the classroom, and I just did it, and I loved the way it felt, and I loved the way it made my students feel, because I would get feedback like, how is this making you feel, this curriculum? And they loved it and I loved it, and it was like a joy every day coming to work. When I was a teacher, it felt like that. It felt like I was coming to see my family, and we didn't always get along and agree, me and the students, middle school, but that was okay. We were still like a family. And then when it came to, when I really started studying this in grad school, I just discovered this history. And I loved it so much. I would read more. And I would be up all night. While people were sleeping, I was grinding. And I still do it. I mean, I go to sleep now. I can't stay up all night like I did in grad school.
We want you to go to sleep.
Grad school, man, 4 a.m. That's when my writing happened. I would write my whole dissertation in one night. I don't know. I had the energy, but I just love what I was reading, and it was like a roadmap. It was like bringing me the other artifacts and other people to read and study. And I'm a practitioner always, so I'm always trying to move from theory and put it into practice, put it into something every day that you can use tomorrow. And so there's been so many people and experiences along the way that have enabled me to get here, like, mentors, programs. I was in a program called Golden Apple of Illinois. And from, before you graduate high school and college, they train you to be a teacher. So they're putting you in CPS, Chicago Public Schools. You're being trained by some of the best teachers, so I had rich experiences like that I would apply to and learn from. And I would just study because I struggled. I struggled a lot in grad school. And so I would just read more and read it again, read it again. And all of that sort of led to the space of where I am. And most importantly, I would still teach. I don't care where, or what I was doing and where I am in my life. I found a way to get to children
Yes.
and to teach them. And, maybe it was a bit selfish because I loved it so much. Like, can you be my student? But, every time I would learn how to be a better teacher, leader, teacher, educator, and a teacher from them. They teach me so much. And so along the way, I would always teach, no matter how old I was or where I was in my process.
Gholdy, when you talk, I'm always sort of just filled with joy. You bring so much.
I smile. People say you smile at every sentence, even when you're talking about oppression.
So joyful, and you just talked about joy, and you talked about staying up and learning your history and how joyful that was, and how much joy you get from teaching. What moved you to formally add joy as a fifth pursuit, right? And so many of us who have the book in its current form might know of four pursuits, but if we've been following you like I have, because I'm like a fan, but also a friend, but I'm a family member. So I'm always like, oh, you sort of formally added joy as a fifth pursuit. So what moved you to add joy? And the second question is, are you thinking about a follow-up or an addendum or a 2.0 version of your book that has joy sort of written in?
Sure, yeah. So, all right. A lot of people don't know this, but I wrote the book mostly in distress. A lot was going on in my life. So that's what I mean. Like, a lot was just happening, but I made it through this book. And I felt like it was something I wanted to pick up, to put out. I felt it was something like my grandma could read, my dad could read, my mom, everyone. And the book was doing pretty good. And then came like the pandemic in March, where everything kind of shut down. And you all noticed some shifts. There was more racial violence in the country. People were forced to stay still and be still and be at home and learn virtually. And folks started talking about equity who haven't been talking about equity. They're like, yeah, now we need to talk about equity. And we're like, well, we've been talking about this like for forever. And more folks, I guess, finally saw the light. I don't know, maybe that's one of the blessings of the pandemic. But they saw the light. They wanted to talk about equity. But people were also hurting still. And it was a new kind of hurt, right? Because we got people sick and hurt and dying and being killed still for the color of their skin during the pandemic. How you going to have both, right? And it was just a lot of pain. And, I write about joy in the book, but I don't give it the attention that I give the other pursuits. And so I started to listen to myself and some of the work I've been doing with teachers. And I said, this needs to be added officially, because some of y'all ain't doing it and some of y'all are and need to be recognized for it. See, I get so much joy in me teaching. I became a little bit stuck in myself, and I'm like, certainly everybody's doing it this way. Have y'all ever felt this way? Like, once you learn something, you like, okay, everybody know this because I learned it. Or once you do something, you like, everybody is doing it this way. Right. But they weren't. So I didn't think I need to be that much intentional about joy. I just thought that was natural, like love. But then I also saw with all the pain, we need a balance of the criticality too, because there is a lot of beauty amongst our people. There is a lot of beauty amongst the world. So I was listening to teachers, I was listening to myself, I was listening to the world, and then that's how joy became added officially. And so in the work that I'm working on now of Unearthing Genius and Joy, it's going to push of how to develop pedagogy. I would love to write a curriculum. I would love to teach teachers how to become like curriculum artists themselves, of developing the kind of pedagogy when the publishing companies are not enough. When their sanctioned school curriculum is not enough. What do you do? With this added layer of joy to it, and how to assess it. If you can teach it, you can assess it. Anything. And teachers really, they're telling me that they would love more support in that area. So that's what I'm thinking.
It's coming, y'all. Joy is coming. I'm so
Yes.
excited. She said,
Joy, out of space,
when
all of this.
public curriculum is not enough or something. I was hearing a title. I was hearing something.
When the
Something.
curriculum is not enough.
So this is perfect for something else I wanted to ask you. So when we talk about how you're writing, not how you're writing, but how you're disrupting anti-whack literacy, um, it's I mean not disrupting, but you're working towards anti-whack literacy, disrupting traditional notions of literacy, and so you talk about how literacy should carry some sort of action, right? And I feel like you're telling teachers like they should be teaching literacy in this way to students. But I also feel like through this book, you're calling for teachers and school leaders to be curricular activists on behalf of their students.
Yes.
And your book is asking them to raise their awareness and become more conscious of how strictly following prescribed curriculum and standards can in fact constrain the genius of students.
Yes.
And so considering this, what stances do teachers and educators need to embody and enact in order to become culturally and historically responsive? And I say this because you said it in your last, if you like, you could read this book and not know Gholdy and just be so moved. But if you read this book and you know Gholdy, you're like, yeah, like you see the embodiment and the enactment of it. And I think to your point about how you had to go back, how you went back and added joy because you just naturally do that, right? And so what stances, and I think a lot of teachers, like how you say you wrote this for teachers like us who are doing this, who can see ourselves and know that, get a pat on the back. I feel like we're always in a state of resistance. We're always subversive. We have to teach, like we have to constantly be in a state of subversiveness and resisting to teach in the ways that we know that are good for our students. So for embodying that, like what stances or do you feel teachers really or have to enact or embody to really teach in these ways?
So, and it's funny because people then celebrate our resistance and our resilience. And I'm like, we don't wake up wanting to resist something, wanting to fight. You think we just love it? Like, we just want to wake up and go to work and not have to fight. Yep. Our colleagues, our people who don't love us, we don't want to resist. We don't want another museum on resistance. We want a museum on Black joy. Right. Have you been to a museum and you're like, "Ooh, this is good," but it's tough. And we've always been doers of the word as a people, and our education have always had the power of doing. This standardization and the way it's used, this worksheets, this is work test prep, working to graduate, test college career readiness. Those are all like important, but that has never been the language or the ultimate goal for Black people. Though that's such smallness in comparison. Like our goal was social change, self-reliance, self-determination. It wasn't just to do all these more small things. And so we've always been that. And so the stances that teachers have to take on, they have to love Black people. If you love Black folks and all of our diversity and what we represent, who have been labeled as the mules of the earth, you can love anybody. If only you can love us. That's the first stance you have to have, is love, authentic, critical love. And, it has to be authentic because people think, oh, yeah, I love this group of Black students because they come to school on time. They love math like I love math. But this group of Black students, they don't like school. They don't like me. I don't really love them, but I don't have a problem because I'm not racist. I love them. No. You got to love them all. You have to love them all. So that stance, you have to embody the 5 pursuits in your daily life, not from 9 to 5 when you're at work and your colleagues are watching, But at night, you have to embody criticality. You have to practice criticality. People have to look at you and say, yeah, I see criticality in him. I see joy. You have to do the identity work. You have to study the cultures of yourself and other people if you're going to teach in this way. That's the stance you have to have. You have to seek knowledge and intellectualism if you're going to teach intellectualism. You have to have skills. So many writing teachers I would work with over the last years
Lord.
don't write.
They don't.
They don't write. They're teaching writing. I mean, you can argue if it's
No
teaching,
skills.
but they're pushing writing, prompting writing, but they have never put their writing in a vulnerable way in front of their students. What kind of stance is this? So if you could imagine with me, if we had like a teacher ed program and you had to audition to be in the teacher prep program, we ain't about to accept anybody to be a teacher anymore. And not that everybody's been doing that. But sometimes, you apply, you get good grades, you write an essay, you're in our program.
Yep.
I want, just like a musician will audition for a music program, a theater arts major will showcase their portfolio. That's what I want to see. I want to see your stances. I want to see your curricular development. Of course, it's going to be developed and polished in the program like any other program should be, but you have to come in having anti-racist stances, loving stances. You have to come in, you may not be able to name all the theories, but you should be able to name why there are the discrepancies and problems that we have in the world. See, it has to be some kind of heart, mind, soul, kind of way of figuring out who should be the next generations of teachers. Because the disposition checklist that we give students and the basic skills test and the essays, that's not enough. We want the brightest and the most conscious to be in front of our children in the world. So that may mean, that shakes up the whole system. We got to recruit people. We got to put our money toward it, but we will get something so beautiful in return. We would get the most beautiful neighbors to live next to in return. We would get people who choose humanity over capitalism in return.
Yes. In hearing you speak now and also reading the book, for me, there are very clear connections to the sort of pedagogical work of other Black women specifically. In your book, you actually talk about how you're extending the work of Gloria Ladson-Billings. You talk about Geneva Gay. I would throw in Vanessa Siddle Walker. These sort of Black women who have been saying very similar things for a very long time. And so in thinking about them and extending their legacy, I think y'all know this, but Gloria Ladson-Billings has talked at length about how misunderstood her work has become and how reduced down to, diversity and representation it has become. What would you say is the most misunderstood thing about your work, like that you're seeing and your work?
Yeah, that's a good question. And first of all, I anticipate, having her say that so much and me listen to it. I anticipated it before, since the times of the Bible. People take the Bible and take it and twist it up and make it fit for their lives. They've done it with all kinds of texts. Of course, they're going to do it with my text. Why wouldn't it? It's a practice. The most misconception is around criticality. Is critical thinking. Oh, as long as I'm engaged in rich critical thinking, I'm doing criticality. Or they make it small. Criticality, like critical theory, addresses oppression, marginalization, right? Abuse, power across different realms, different groups of people, different identities. But people, some teachers, they'll take up the work and say, oh, I just want to teach criticality around like the harm of the land or animals, or criticality around the harm of women or people with different abilities, and not anti-Black racism or not anti, homophobia. They want to take parts of it and just say, well, I'm comfortable here, so I'm just not going to address that. But you're not addressing the full systemic oppressive system with just looking at animals or the land or the air or one group of people. So that's what they mistake up. They a bit. And so a lot of another misconception is that they think it's really hard to teach these pursuits. And then I put them in a group together where they can share their genius as teachers. And they create something so magical and so beautiful for students. All over the world, I've been doing this. They're like, this is too hard. Put them in a room. Oh, wow. Then they create something like grand. So I think we're learning that that's the case too. Or a lot of people think that this is just for ELA and social studies. So one thing my model does is makes math humanities, which I'm writing about in my book, my next book, that makes science humanities, PE humanities, arts humanities. It's not just those traditional content areas.
And I love that about your book, because I feel like even those examples that you have at the end, where you have a PE lesson and a math lesson, whenever I read this book with future teachers, they're always amazed by that. Like, wow. I'm like, yeah, you can do this
Wait, what sound
everywhere.
did you make?
And they're like, wow.
We had
Yeah.
culture, identity, criticality, and math. But when you're only used to Socrates, Plato, and whiteness or white people in mathematics and writing, that's all you're gonna know. And then some teachers say, well, how do I know more when nobody has taught me? I'm gonna tell you what my Uncle Obi used to tell me. May God rest his soul. You better teach yourself, sister. Every time we didn't know something, he would tell me, you better teach yourself. Who you waiting for? One thing black people didn't do, they didn't rely on folks and wait for folks. We figured it out. We got it. It's a model for everybody.
It is. And I just want to go back a little bit to what you said about, um, what people misunderstand about your work. And what no if teachers had to audition to be in teacher education programs, because I feel like we let any and everybody. It's like, first of all, our profession is so disrespected. It's not honored the way it should be, as we're doing real intellectual work. And I love your book. I don't know if this is my favorite thing about it, but it's up there. I love this about it, is that it brings us back to, like, this is a craft. You have intellect. You are doing intellectual work as a teacher, and you are thinking deeply, and you need to go research, and you're not going to have this little checklist. You got to go and you got to think and be thoughtful and creative about what you're bringing before students. And I love that, because I do think that everything is so watered down so much, and we expect students to do so much hard work, and do it, and do it joyfully, and do it willingly, and do it at high levels, and we don't even want to do that as teachers.
Exactly.
You know and you just turn that back on us. Like, I mean, if you really follow these, even I know you add enjoy, but even just the four, you are really doing high level, deep thinking, and well thought out planning. And I tell my students all the time when I'm teaching, when I'm teaching as a teacher educator, like, you're not here just to sit here and play. This is not the tip. Like, we're here to do intellectual work. Yes, as future teachers, you're here to do. I don't know why that's strange, but do you find that, like?
Oh, for sure. I said many years ago before I wrote the book, I'm going to write a book called Teachers Are Just Like the Students, just like the children. The way we act. I remember a teacher, I had to have her write on demand. I was teaching her how to teach writing. I said, okay, I want to see your writing. She ripped it up, got mad, like almost slammed it down. I said, I wonder, should I kick you out the PD? Because that's what you do to our children, according to her. Like, they're non-compliant. And it's like, we see some of the things that we ask of our students, we don't want to do. I stopped doing it. I stopped doing it in my college courses too. If I don't want to do it myself, I'm not going to assign it.
Mm-hmm.
If I don't do it myself, I'm not going to assign it. If I haven't done it myself, I'm not going to assign it because I'm not going to want to grade it, maybe, and they may not want to do it either. So yeah, I see a lot of that. And it's kind of like if you had like a factory of making, let's say, I use a lot of like fashion metaphors too in my work. And they would never let me on Project Runway or one of these making the cut. And sometimes I wonder how some people become teachers because I'm like, they would never let me get on that show, and I would love to be on it. But they would never let me on it because there's something organically inside of me that maybe isn't there yet. I don't know. But anyway, it's almost like if you were like a factory creating dresses over and over again, repeatedly. Or you had, dress and fashion designers and seamstress and all that who were designing based on the customer's body and their fit and their needs. That's the difference, right? Our educational system has been in the first realm where it's been like anybody can teach and everybody should be on the same page, the same book, the same day. We hear teachers still say that to this day. And when it's like that, we are going to have people leave and we're going to have shortages and we just keep filling it up. Instead of having this as a more artistic endeavor where we bring in people, we prepare them, we sustain them, we keep them. Yep. Where we wouldn't have so much turnover, we invest in it. And as a nation, we have the funds to invest. We do in a better system. We're choosing not to. And a lot of the U.S. Secretaries of Education, we have to ask, when's the last time you written curriculum? When's the last time you taught? Curriculum is the heart and soul of this nation, of a school. And if we have our leaders who are not engaged in it, that's a problem.
So I'm going to throw this out there because I think we're going to try it. The three of us are teacher educators, right? All of us work in different institutions, but all of us work with pre-service teachers and maybe in-service teachers. Mm-hmm. And so I am thinking out loud here, Tiffany and Gholdy, I'm thinking out loud. What does it look like to do, one, the very hard thing that I don't see a lot of teacher educators do, which is analyze our own educational homes? Because if we're talking about these programs that are letting teachers in and they coming in and not getting no criticality and graduating, a lot of it is us, right? And so we're writing these wonderful things, doing this critical work and talking about the work of teaching in K-12. But I'm also wondering, Gholdy, and maybe Tiffany too, if you've been able to, could we use this same framework?
Yeah.
For us in teacher education and for our curriculum and thinking about how we are also promoting intellectuality and criticality. And of course, there are some skills, right? But identity and then now joy. I don't know that I'm seeing us take this up in a way that is meaningful in the way that we want teachers in K-12 to do so. And so it goes back to Christine Sleeter and her wonderful article, right, revealing the whiteness of teacher education. Have we even changed at all?
Right.
As teacher educators and teacher educators.
Well, I do be using Dr. Muhammad in my work. I use those for precepts, and I follow her, and I be using it, Dr. Muhammad. You can come see, observe me.
So, and you're like the teacher who uses it in the school, right? But the truth of the matter is we are choosing. We need to be very honest with ourselves.
That's right.
Whether if we're talking about the U.S. Department of Education, we're talking about a school district, a school, or a program in a college of education. We are choosing not to take up these methods and models of education. And then we say the same thing schools say, well, we got so much pressure from the state to pass these tests and to meet these standards. We do that too. I remember when EdTPA came among us, and all of a sudden they're like, make sure EdTPA is in your syllabus. I'm like, I'm not teaching to the test at a college level. I am teaching richness and rigor and joy and genius and all this. And because of that, they'll pass the test. But it's like those same pressures, those same lack of evaluations. Notice, and it's a little different at UIC, But notice, like, at Georgia State, there was no requirement for criticality to get tenure. Why not? We're in Atlanta.
So weird.
We're in.
So weird.
We educate more Black students and graduate more Black students than anyone in the nation, and this is not a requirement for your faculty. We allow for so long students to graduate without ever writing a lesson plan related to justice and criticality, because that ain't on the Ed TPA. So if the Ed TPA doesn't change, we can change. We're just choosing not to. And it's either going to be, right, as James Baldwin said, because of ignorance, people just really don't know. And they don't want to pick up and find out a book and find out. And two, they're fearful. If we change it up, what is that going to do? Can you imagine if they changed the keyboard letters? Yeah. Because they said this is not the best way, the movements for the structural muscles of your fingers. We have to change the letters. So Q is going to be where M is, da, 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 da. Do you know how uncomfortable that will make us until we figure it out? Who wants that? Nobody wants if it's better for you, you're going to say, well, let's change up the keyboards. It'll be a new norm over time. That's what we're trying to push people to think as. But the thought of my keyboard letters changing, and it's going to take me time, and I've spent years with this keyboard. You know what I'm saying? Like, people don't want that. So that's why the programs stay the same. And then another 20 years, it's going to be 3 more people on the podcast saying the same thing.
Let's hope not. So book. So basically,
talking about how we are their North Stars. You know what I'm saying? That's what it will be.
That's the point I think I'm making, and I'm not trying to be like negative, right, or super cynical. And I'm just like, it's interesting to me that the folks who are producing wonderful resources and creating very critical things in education work in teacher education programs. And so how is it that you have this source of so much criticality, but then when I look at their curriculum, when I look at what they are doing to prepare, I'm not talking about individuals, I mean generally, what we are doing to prepare teachers, it is not critical at all. And then they get to Tiffany, they get to Gholdy, they get to me, and they're looking with these eyes like, we don't do this here. And so then it does become, I'm the one-off class, I'm the one-off person talking about diversity and equity and justice and Blackness explicitly.
I don't even smile. my teacher, when I was leaving Georgia State, one student said, "You're the first professor who told me I love you," and she says, "You met me that same day. You told me you love me, and you said I love you, sis." And she said that just stayed with me. And I had, my new class, they didn't smile like the first day, and I wasn't used to this. I'm just used to like Black joy and all these things. People, they come to us and then it's like a whole new something, and they either embrace it or they like finally, or it's like the keyboard is uncomfortable for them.
Yeah.
And I think what we've been kind of saying throughout, in addition to your work and how you're teaching us, with what Shamari's saying about, how we need to see this as in teacher education programs where we're actually doing this. I think you also have to live this and embody it. Mm-hmm. And that's what we don't see. Like, I feel
exactly.
Just like you talk about all these new equity people and some of these old equity people, and I'm not going to say no names, but I'm just saying, like, we have to, do you buy what you write about? And I'm not saying that we have to be perfect. I'm not perfect. I'm going to mess up. I may have to be I've had to apologize to students. I have misunderstood things. So it's not about being perfect, but I do think, like, are we attempting to live this? Like, I honor you so much, Gholdy. You are a North Star for me, because I feel like before I met you, and other Black women scholars who move in particular ways, I didn't see people moving like that through the academy. And I think, like, we have to, when we writing about love, are you loving? You writing about joy, do you got joy, or are you just trying to get a big name? And some of us,
Are you
Some of us,
mean?
would you say, are you mean? Are you mean? I can't take
I
mean
mean,
people.
it's
Just mean.
exactly.
Yeah. Wow. No, I think Tiffany, you're like
I
making
hear
me
you.
reflect. I'm also not going to say any names, but you're
Right.
sort of helping me see just how rare, and I'll sort of name people that I love and why. Gholdy Muhammad, I think, lives what she writes about. Yolanda Celie Ruiz writes
Yep.
about love and is
Absolutely.
love. Bettina Love believes
Yep.
every single thing that she writes about. Carmen Kennard is incredible and
Oh yeah.
actually is that person that's
Mm-hmm,
writing.
mm-hmm,
I'd be like,
I don't know that I could keep listening all day because eventually I'm going to run against people who write wonderful things. And now I've met you at conferences or we've had some email exchanges and they don't live it. They actually don't embody it. And I feel like, oh, they're just trying to become the
Makes
next
you want to
generation.
cry.
Or they want tenure, right? Or
right.
they're already tenured and they want to go up for full, etc. It's just like, wow, what are you in this for?
Yeah.
Yep. Or unethical, moving unethical ways. And so I think
Yeah.
this is beautiful because I think you know, it's not just about doing the thing. It's about living it. And I'm not talking about being perfect. I'm not saying that you may never ever have to get called in, you
Mm-hmm.
know, to we're all learning. We all have to disrupt our own areas of privilege, you know, that we live in. But I do think that um I appreciate this, you know, and you can feel your spirit and you read your words. You can, it's just like I'll be reading like a line, I'll be like, "That's so Gholdy." I can just see her saying that. I can just see her doing this, and so I appreciate you. I honor you for that.
Love you.
I thank you for. I'm just glad that of all these people that's out here working with teachers, I'm glad that if you are blessed to have Dr. Gholdy Muhammad come to your school, you getting a real one. You ain't getting somebody that's out here just trying to sit up here and just be
I can't listen.
consulting so they could get, you know, this, that, and the other, and da 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 da. And you know what? And you deserve all your things. So sometimes people, you know, I think sometimes people see people grow, like those of us who have seen you grow over time, and they get bigger, and you be like, oh, they famous now. No, some people they get bigger because their work, they have planted these seeds, they have, you know, tilled the soil too. So then now it's time to, you know, it's not that they're just out here trying to do it. You just responded to the universe, right? Not that that was your, and so I appreciate that about you.
Yeah. No, thank you,
Love
sis.
you. We love you.
I love you both too. You all are you teach me so many things. You know, I would look at you both and say, man, you know, I wish I was like Shamari in grad school. He just talked like a full professor.
Mm-hmm.
Not an assistant, not an associate, but a full. And he had confidence. And I'm like, I want to be like Shamari. And I would see how Tiffany would stand and come into any room, sis, and you would light it up. If somebody was angry, sad, jealous, you would almost just through your presence and your smile make them feel like, don't stop being like that. You know what I'm saying? That's a very unique quality to have and to possess. So, you know, and the work that you are doing, you know, you both are teaching us too that it doesn't have to be an either or. You don't have to be sweet and passive and loving, but you come, Tiffany, with this strength that will cut. You know, so when you light up that room and you see, hey, Tiffany, like, hey, how you doing? Give me a hug. But you know, when it come to it, she gonna speak and speak truth into power, and you know, because some people can like confuse that. And so, you know, you're teaching us that you can have self care. We're teaching each other. We can take care of ourselves and have a fruitful career. We can smile and talk about the profession, right? We can have joy in the tenure track. I had a lot of joy in my tenure track because I'm just like, yo, if I don't get tenure, this would have been a cool 5 years. And I have all other things I can do. I can audition
Right.
to be a seamstress.
Listen,
I can go back into the class. I always keep 5 jobs in my back pocket. I
listen, because they could get rid of us at any time. It's like, I just want you to know this ain't all I know how to do, right? I know how to do a lot of things.
You're
And
the only one who would want me. I want
listen,
myself. and other places too. We are so talented and we are so beautiful. And so when you give up the world in that way, you give up academia, you're not worshiping it.
Yes.
It comes with just a freeing spirit.
Yes.
And that's what makes you open to love each other, to do real ethical work, quality work, to not be jealous of the other scholar. This, when you give it up, is when it happens. And that's what I learned to do, thankfully, early on. And that's probably why you feel what you feel. And I'm guessing y'all have done that too.
Yes. Oh, I know Shamari has, because Shamari be out here living. Okay.
Program. I'm like, how did
I
he
just know
like
that
this?
I'm enough. Yeah, I
Yes.
think looking to people, like I was saying back to North Star, is beyond your work. I think we talk about your work a lot. I'm talking about your humanity, okay? I'm talking about
Yes, that is your work. It shouldn't be two different things.
that invites me, especially Carmen Kennard. Carmen Kennard is, I think, one of the first people I read, and I was like, I can do it in that way. I can be that disruptive. And you talk about in your book, agitation literacy. I can agitate.
Yes.
I didn't know I could do that. I thought that you had to sort of follow the rules and fit in and code switch to get tenure. And I was like, wait a minute. There's a Carmen, there's a Gholdy, there's a Yolanda, there's a Yadilla, there's a Bettina. These are people who their humanity is not sort of, their source of their self-regard isn't their jobs, is what I'm trying to say here.
Yes.
The source of your self-regard is not the university. You know,
and it should feel easier.
We're all bigger than that. And so it's liberating.
People would say like, I went through this struggle. I want to what humanity is that? You also didn't have to get 20 publications to get tenure, number one. But, you know, if tenure is your goal, make it easier for Shamari and others. You're not trying to make it harder for them or just as bad as you had it. Come on. Our ancestors weren't doing what they did for that.
Right. Yes.
Well, we thank you for coming. I'm going to respect your time. What a gift our time with Dr. Gholdy Muhammad was. A time was had. We appreciate her sharing her journey towards creating the culturally and historically responsive model for teaching and learning, from childhood to her time as a teacher and then a graduate student, to her time as a teacher educator and PD facilitator. In doing so, Dr. Muhammad calls us, especially teacher education programs, to carefully consider who should be the next generation of teachers. Moreover, she sets the caliber at the brightest and most conscious, arguing for those in power to release the necessary resources to make it happen. If you haven't already, please go out and get her books, Cultivating Genius, an Equity Model for Culturally and Historically Responsive Literacy, and the sequel, Unearthing Joy, a Guide to Culturally and Historically Responsive Teaching and Learning. Thank you for listening to part 2 of our Culturally and Historically Responsive Literacy Now, the Brilliance and Joy of Students of Color series. Be sure to tune in next Wednesday for part 3, where we interview New York City-based master teacher Evelise Ramos-Brennan about how she implements the culturally and historically responsive literacy model in her classroom and some other thoughts she has on teaching. Trust, you do not want to miss that. To find out more about the Evolving Education Project, to write in, or to join our listserv, check us out at evolvingeducationproject.com. And please subscribe to this podcast and follow us on Instagram, X, and Facebook. If you can only choose one, please follow us on Instagram and love all of our posts. This is support that doesn't cost a dime. If you've been enjoying our podcast, you can also support us by writing a review. Favorable reviews help more educators, organizers, families, communities, and activists to find us. We hope to continue to cultivate an authentic audience and community. We want you to help us to evolve over time and shape what this could be. Now that you know what we're about, let us know what you want to learn more about, authors that you would like us to interview, discussions you would like to have. Also, please write in by sharing your stories, dilemmas, joys, a related incident that made you laugh, questions, disbeliefs, hopes, and more when it comes to people of color. You can write in through the website, but if you ain't got time for all that, I definitely get it. Write in by sending us a DM through any of our social media outlets. And if you don't want to type it out, you can write in by sending us a voice memo, audio recording, or video. All of this counts as a write-in. Okay, you might be wondering, who should write in? Am I someone who should be writing into this podcast, should be sharing my experiences and stories? This is who we would love to write in: children and youth of color, parents and caregivers of children and youth of color, traditional and non-traditional educators, students, teachers, leaders, administrators from early childhood to higher ed, activists, organizers, artists, authors, community workers and leaders, nonprofit, not-for-profit folks, and anyone who loves people of color, is invested in their humanity, and is invested in their past, presents, and futures, and those who want to make social justice a reality. We will discuss your write-ins on the show anonymously unless you tell us otherwise, so don't miss it. Tune in next Wednesday for a new episode. Okay, that's all for now, good people. We out.